They looked at her hoodie and saw a problem. She looked at her phone and saw their bankruptcy. It was supposed to be a routine flight from New York to London, a simple trip for James Vance, a woman who had quietly built an empire from the dirt up. But when a smug flight attendant looked her up and down and decided she didn't look like first-class material, handing her paid-for seat to a loud-mouthed tech millionaire, instead, he made the biggest mistake of his career. He didn't know that the woman he was disrespecting wasn't just a passenger. She was the silent investor holding the airline's $900 million lifeline. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She made one phone call. 5 minutes later, the pilot got a message from the tower that made his blood run cold. This is the story of the most expensive mistake in aviation history. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of overpriced coffee and anxiety. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of grey, drizzling day that made the fluorescent lights of the airport feel particularly harsh. James Vance adjusted the strap of her vintage leather weekender bag and pulled her hood up slightly. She wasn't hiding exactly, but she had learned long ago that invisibility was a superpower. At 42, James was the CEO of Vantage Holdings, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed assets. She didn't wear her net worth on her sleeve. There were no logos on her charcoal cashmere hoodie, no diamonds flashing on her fingers, and her sneakers, while orthopedically designed and absurdly expensive, looked like something you'd grab off a rack at a department store. She was exhausted. The last 72 hours had been a blur of boardrooms in Tokyo and conference calls in splashes of time zones that didn't make sense to the human body. All she wanted was Seat 1A on Aerolux Flight 492 to Heathrow. She wanted the lie-flat bed, the glass of mediocre warm nuts, and 8 hours of uninterrupted silence. She approached the gate, clutching her boarding pass. Her ticket was full fare. First class, costing roughly $14,000, booked under her personal assistant's name, initially for security reasons, then transferred to her. The gate agent, a harried-looking woman named Sarah, scanned James's phone without looking up. The machine let out a sharp, angry beep. Sarah sighed the sound of someone who had already dealt with 10 screaming toddlers that morning. She typed something into her terminal. Her eyebrows knit together. She typed again, harder this time. "Is there a problem?" James asked, her voice low and smooth. She had a voice that commanded boardrooms, but here it was just quiet. "The system is flagging your seat," Sarah muttered. She picked up a phone. "Marcus. Can you come up to the podium? I have a duplicate assignment on 1A. James felt a prickle of irritation at the base of her neck. She checked her watch. Boarding was supposed to start in 10 minutes. She had a meeting in London that could technically wait, but she didn't want it to. A moment later, Marcus emerged from the jet bridge. Marcus Sterling was the chief purser for the flight, and he wore his uniform like it was a suit of armor. He was tall, impeccably groomed, with teeth so white they looked synthetic. He had the air of a man who believed the aircraft was his personal kingdom, and the passengers were merely serfs allowed to visit. He walked over to the podium, his eyes scanning the crowd before landing on James. He did a quick appraisal, the messy bun, the lack of makeup, the hoodie. His lip curled just a fraction of a millimeter. It was a micro-expression James had seen 1,000 times in her life. It was the look that said, "You don't belong here." "Problem?" Marcus asked Sarah, ignoring James entirely. "Seat 1A, Sarah whispered, though not quietly enough. "The system shows it assigned to Mr. Halloway, but this passenger has a valid boarding pass for it too." Marcus turned to James. He didn't smile. "Ma'am, let me see your boarding pass." James held out her phone. Marcus took it, scrolling through the details with an exaggerated slowness. Vance, he read aloud. When did you purchase this 3 days ago? James said. Is there an issue I'd like to board early if possible? I have work to do. Marcus handed the phone back, wiping his hand on his trousers as if the device were sticky. Well, Ms. Vance, it appears there's been a glitch. Seat 1A is occupied by one of our Global Services members, a Platinum partner. I paid full fare, James said, keeping her tone even. I didn't upgrade. I bought the seat. Be that as it may, Marcus said, his voice taking on that condescending sing-song quality people use when talking to children or the elderly. The seat is taken, but Bradford Halloway is already on his way down the bridge. We can't unseat a Global Services member for... He gestured vaguely at her outfit. For a glitch. James stiffened. I'm not a glitch, Marcus. I'm a paying customer. And I don't care if the Queen of England is sitting in 1A. I paid for it. I checked in, and I have the pass. Marcus let out a short, derisive laugh. Look, we're overbooked. It happens. I can move you to economy comfort. Row 12 has extra legroom. We'll throw in a meal voucher. I don't want a meal voucher, James said, her eyes narrowing. I want the seat I paid $14,000 for. There is no need to raise your voice, Marcus said loudly, causing several people in the waiting area to turn and look. James hadn't raised her voice at all. It was a classic escalation tactic. Make the victim look aggressive. I am speaking perfectly calmly, James said. I would like to speak to the gate supervisor. I am the senior crew member on site, Marcus lied. And frankly, your attitude is becoming a safety concern. If you're going to be difficult, I can deny you boarding entirely. Just then a man swept past them. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit, tan leather loafers, and carried a Toomey briefcase that probably cost more than most people's cars. He was talking loudly into an earpiece. Yeah, tell the SEC to wait, I don't care. I'm boarding. I'll call you from the air. Get the merger papers ready. He slapped his boarding pass on the scanner. Beep. Green light. Good morning, Mr. Halloway. Marcus beamed, his entire demeanor transforming instantly. He looked like a golden retriever seeing its owner. Right this way, sir. Seat 1A is ready for you. I have that scotch you like pre-poured. Bradford Halloway didn't even look at Marcus. He just grunted and kept walking toward the jet bridge. James stepped in front of the lane. Excuse me. That is my seat. Bradford stopped. He looked at James, taking in the hoodie and the sneakers. He smirked. Excuse me. I think you're in the wrong line, sweetheart. Crew entry and cleaning staff go in through the side door. The insult was so casual, so practiced, that it hit harder than a slap. I am a passenger, James said, her voice turning into ice. And you are sitting in my seat. Bradford laughed, looking at Marcus. Marcus, is this person bothering me? I'm handling it, Mr. Halloway, Marcus said, stepping between them. He loomed over James, using his height to intimidate. Ma'am, step aside. Now. Or I call security. James looked at Marcus. She looked at Bradford, who was already checking his Rolex, bored by her existence. You're making a mistake, James said softly. The only mistake, Marcus sneered, leaning in close, so only she could hear, was thinking you could buy your way into a class you don't belong in. Take the voucher and go to row 12, or get off my flight. James stared at him for a long, heavy second. She memorized his face. She memorized the name tag, M. Sterling. She memorized the smug indifference of Bradford Halloway. Fine, James said. Marcus smirked triumphantly. He thought he had won. He thought she had folded like a cheap suit. Smart choice, Marcus said, waving Bradford through. Enjoy the back of the bus. James stepped out of the line. She didn't go to row 12. She didn't go to the economy line. She walked over to a quiet corner of the gate area near the large windows overlooking the tarmac where the massive Boeing 737 sat. She took out her phone. She didn't open Instagram. She didn't open text messages. She opened her contacts and scrolled to a number she had saved simply as David, CFO. She hit dial. While the phone rang, James watched through the glass. She could see the movement inside the cockpit of the plane. The pilots were going through their pre-flight checks. They had no idea that their aircraft was currently sitting on a financial fault line. James. David's voice answered on the second ring. He sounded surprised. I thought you were in the air. Everything okay? No, David. Everything is not okay. What happened? Is it the Tokyo deal? The Tokyo deal is fine, James said, turning her back to the gate so she wouldn't be overheard. I'm at JFK. I'm looking at Aerolux Flight 492. I was just denied my seat. Denied like bumped, racially profiled and humiliated, actually. James corrected her voice, devoid of emotion, which was always more terrifying than if she were shouting. By a purser named Marcus Sterling. He gave my seat to Bradford Halloway. Halloway, the hedge fund guy, the one currently under investigation for insider trading. The very same. Apparently he's a global services member, and I don't look the part. There was a silence on the line. David knew James better than anyone. He knew that James Vance didn't have an ego about money. She drove a 5-year-old Volvo. She ate at diners. But she had a zero-tolerance policy for disrespect, specifically the kind rooted in prejudice. What do you want to do, James? We can file a formal complaint. I can get the legal team to draft a letter before you land. No, James said. A letter takes weeks. I want a reaction now. She paused, watching the baggage handlers load suitcases into the belly of the plane. David, what is our current position with Aerolux's parent company, Horizon Air Group? David hesitated, the sound of keyboard clacking in the background. We're the lead underwriter for their bridge loan, the Series B liquidity injection, $900 million. It's scheduled to transfer. Well, technically it's pending final authorization this afternoon. The paperwork is signed, but the funds haven't cleared escrow yet. And who has the final signature authority on releasing those funds? You do, James. And what happens if that money doesn't hit their accounts by 5:10 p.m. today? They default on their fuel credit lines, David said, his voice dropping. They won't be able to refuel their long-haul fleet in London or Dubai. Their stock would plummet. It would be catastrophic. Good, James said. Freeze it. Freeze. The entire 900 million, David choked. James, that deal has been in the works for 6 months. The board will go crazy. The SEC will ask questions. I am the chairman of the board, David, and I am telling you that I have lost confidence in the current operational leadership of Horizon Air Group, specifically their inability to vet staff who treat their primary investors with basic human dignity. Pause the transfer. Put a hold on the escrow. Okay, David said slowly. It's your call, but they're going to panic. Their CEO, Jonathan Reed, is going to be calling you in 5 minutes. I'm counting on it, James said. But don't have him call me. I'm going to be unavailable. Give him the number for the cockpit. The cockpit. You heard me? Tell Reed that if he wants to know why his company is about to flatline, he needs to speak to the captain of Flight 492. Tell him the answer is sitting in the terminal. James hung up. She didn't get back in line. She walked up to the glass doors of the jet bridge, but she didn't board. She stood there, waiting. Inside the plane, the atmosphere was festive in first class. Bradford Halloway was already on his second glass of scotch, laughing loudly at something on his phone. Marcus Sterling was fluffing pillows, ensuring Bradford was comfortable. "Anything else I can get you, Mr. Halloway?" Marcus asked smoothly. "Yeah, make sure that trash from the gate doesn't sneak into the back. Don't want her stealing the silverware," Bradford joked. Marcus chuckled. "Don't worry, sir. I think she got the message. She's probably halfway to the subway by now." In the cockpit, Captain Richard O'Malley was running through the final checklist with his first officer. Everything looked green. The engines were spooling. The fuel load was confirmed. Suddenly, the ACARS system, the digital messaging system used by pilots, chimed with an urgent alert. Ping. Captain O'Malley looked down. Usually these messages were about weather updates or gate changes. The message read, "Urgent. Company Ops. Contact CEO Reed immediately via satphone. Priority 1. Do not push back." "What the hell?" O'Malley muttered. "Do not push back. We're 3 minutes from slot time. Priority 1. From the CEO. The first officer looked pale. "That never happens." O'Malley grabbed the satellite handset. He dialed the direct line for operations. It didn't go to a dispatcher. It went straight to the executive office. "This is Flight 492, Captain O'Malley," he said. "Hold for Mr. Reed," a shaky voice said. A second later, Jonathan Reed, the CEO of the entire airline, was on the line. He sounded like he was having a heart attack. "Captain, tell me exactly what is happening on your aircraft right now." "Sir, we're just finishing boarding. Pre-flight checks complete. We're ready to go." "You are not ready to go," Reed screamed. "I just got a call from Vantage Holdings. They just froze our entire liquidity financing. Do you understand what that means?" "O'Malley, it means we are bankrupt by sunset." "Sir, I don't understand what this has to do with my flight." "They said the reason is on your plane," Reed snapped. "They said the chairman of Vantage was denied her seat. Is there a passenger named Vance on your manifest?" O'Malley frantically pulled up the manifest on his iPad. He scrolled down. "Vance? Vance? Yes. James Vance. Seat 1A. But, wait." He looked at the status. "It shows boarding denied, agent discretion. Seat reassigned to Halloway Bradford." "Find her," Reed ordered. "Find her right now. If she isn't in seat 1A with a glass of our finest vintage champagne in her hand, in the next 60 seconds, don't bother taking off. You'll be flying an empty plane for a defunct airline." "Sir, we already gave the seat to a global services partner." "I don't care if you gave the seat to the Pope," Reed roared. "Kick him off. That woman is the only reason we have jobs tomorrow. Fix it, O'Malley. Fix it or you're fired." The line went dead. Captain O'Malley stared at the phone. He looked at his first officer. "Get the purser up here," O'Malley said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Now." Back in the cabin, Marcus was pouring a refill for Bradford. He felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see the first officer looking frantic. "Marcus, Captain needs you. Now." "I'm in the middle of service," Marcus said, annoyed. "Now," the first officer hissed. Marcus rolled his eyes at Bradford. "Pilots," he mouthed, then followed the first officer into the galley. Captain O'Malley burst out of the cockpit door. He looked furious. "Did you deny boarding to a passenger named James Vance?" O'Malley asked, his voice shaking with rage. Marcus blinked. "The girl in the hoodie. Yeah, she was causing a scene. Plus the seat was double booked. I gave it to Mr. Halloway." He's platinum." "You idiot," O'Malley whispered. "Do you know who she is? She's nobody." Marcus shrugged. "She was wearing a hoodie. She owns the bank that owns us," O'Malley shouted, causing the entire first-class cabin to fall silent. "She just froze the company's assets because you didn't like her outfit." Marcus's face went pale. The color drained out of him so fast, he looked like a wax figure. "What? Where is she?" O'Malley demanded. I told her to go to economy or leave," Marcus stammered. O'Malley pushed past him. He ran down the aisle out the aircraft door and into the jet bridge. He saw her. James was standing by the window looking at the rain. She hadn't left. Captain O'Malley, a man with 30 years of flight experience, a man who had flown through hurricanes and war zones, ran up to her breathless. "Miss Vance?" he asked. James turned slowly. Her expression was unreadable. "Captain, Miss Vance, please." O'Malley said, his hands actually trembling. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I just spoke to Mr. Reed. Please, come aboard. Your seat is waiting." James looked at him. Then she looked past him at Marcus, who was peeking out from the aircraft door, looking like a ghost. "My seat is occupied, Captain," James said calmly. "By a Mr. Halloway." "Not for long," O'Malley vowed. "I will physically remove him myself if I have to." James checked her watch. "You have 5 minutes to push back, Captain. If I'm not in the air by then, I'm cancelling the deal permanently." "Please," O'Malley said, gesturing to the plane. "After you." James picked up her bag. She walked past the captain. She walked onto the plane. She stopped in the galley. Marcus was standing there, pressed against the beverage cart, trying to make himself small. James didn't yell. She didn't scold. She simply stopped, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I believe you have my seat." The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that usually precedes a natural disaster or a violent altercation. The other passengers in rows 2, 3, and 4, wealthy tourists, a couple of executives, and a famous Broadway actress, had all lowered their newspapers and tablets. They were watching the theater of the absurd unfold at the front of the plane. James Vance stood in the galley entrance, her sneaker resting on the plush blue carpet that separated the crew area from the passenger cabin. She didn't move toward seat 1A. She simply waited. Her face was a mask of calm, but her eyes were fixed on Bradford Halloway, who was currently oblivious, scrolling through emails on his phone, sipping the amber liquid in his crystal glass. Marcus Sterling, the chief purser, who had sneered at her only minutes ago, looked like a man standing on a trap door with the rope around his neck. He was clutching a linen napkin so tightly his knuckles were white. "Mr. Halloway," Captain O'Malley said, his voice booming slightly more than intended in the quiet cabin. He stepped into the aisle, his gold stripes catching the cabin light. Bradford didn't look up. "Not now, Captain. I'm trying to send this before we push back. Tell the tower to hurry up." "We are not pushing back, sir," O'Malley said, stepping closer. "And you are not flying with us today." Bradford's thumb hovered over his screen. He slowly raised his head, a look of genuine confusion warring with his default setting of arrogance. "Excuse me, there has been a mistake regarding the seating assignment," O'Malley said, his jaw set hard. "This seat belongs to the passenger standing in the galley. You were upgraded in error. I need you to gather your things and deplane immediately." Bradford laughed. It was a loud, barking sound. He looked around the cabin, seeking allies. "Is this a joke? Is this some kind of candid camera PR stunt?" He pointed a manicured finger at Marcus. "Your boy here seated me. He poured my drink. I'm a global services member. I practically own a wing of this airline. Actually, sir, O'Malley said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl, the woman standing behind me literally owns the airline's future as of this morning. And right now, she is the only reason this plane, or any plane in our fleet, is going to have fuel to fly tomorrow. Now get up. Bradford's eyes darted to James. He looked at the hoodie again. He looked at the messy bun. His brain couldn't compute the data. In his world, power wore suits. Power wore watches that cost as much as a house. Power didn't wear sneakers. Her, Bradford scoffed, though his voice wavered slightly. You're kicking me off for her. She looks like she's here to clean the lavatories. A collective gasp went through the cabin. The Broadway actress in 2F audibly whispered, "Oh my God." James didn't flinch. She took one step forward. "Captain O'Malley," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "I'm not interested in this man's opinion of my wardrobe. I'm interested in my seat. If he isn't out of it in 60 seconds, I'm walking off. And if I walk off, I make the call to finalize the freeze." O'Malley turned back to Bradford. The captain's face was beet red. He reached for his radio. "Operations, this is 492. I need Port Authority police at the gate. Immediately. Passenger refusal to deplane. Possible intoxication. Belligerent behavior." "Intoxication!" Bradford shrieked, jumping up. The tray table rattled, knocking his scotch onto the floor. "I've had one drink. You can't do this to me. I'm Bradford Halloway." "I'm in the middle of a merger." "You're in the middle of a trespassing incident," O'Malley said. "Marcus, grab his bag." Marcus froze. He was caught between two nightmares. On one side, the terrifying reality of the CEO's wrath via the captain. On the other, the man he had been fawning over just moments ago. "Marcus!" O'Malley barked. Marcus jumped. He scrambled toward the overhead bin. Yes, Captain." He pulled down the Toomey briefcase. Bradford grabbed the handle, wrestling it away from Marcus. "Don't touch my property. This is assault. I'll sue. I'll sue all of you. I'll buy this airline just to fire you." "Sir, the airline is currently in a liquidity crisis," James said dryly from the galley. "I wouldn't recommend buying it. The fundamentals are shaky, mostly due to poor staffing choices." Bradford turned on her, his face purple. He loomed over her, stepping into the galley space. "You think you're smart. You think you're special because you tricked some pilot. You're nobody. You hear me? I'll ruin you." James looked up at him. She smiled, a small, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Halloway, my name is James Vance. I run Vantage Holdings. If you check your phone, assuming you still have a signal, you'll see that my firm just initiated a hostile takeover of the tech company you're trying to merge with. We bought the controlling stake 20 minutes ago while I was waiting for the gate agent to finish insulting me." Bradford froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He fumbled for his phone. He tapped frantically. His face went grey. "No," he whispered. That's impossible. Vantage, you're Vance. And you're leaving," James said. Two Port Authority officers appeared at the aircraft door, breathless. "Captain, we got a call," O'Malley pointed at Bradford. "Get him off my ship." The officers stepped forward. "Sir, let's go. Don't make this hard." Bradford Halloway, the titan of tech. The man who had walked onto the plane like a king, looked around the cabin. No one would meet his eyes. He looked at James one last time. There was fear in his eyes now. Genuine terror. He realized he hadn't just lost a seat. He had likely lost his merger, his reputation and his leverage, all because he judged a book by its cover. He slumped. He let the officers guide him out, dragging his expensive feet. As he passed Marcus, he spat, "You're an idiot." Marcus flinched as if he'd been hit. When Bradford was gone, the silence returned, but the tension had shifted. Now every eye was on James. She walked to seat 1A. She looked at the puddle of spilled scotch on the floor. She looked at the crumpled pillow Bradford had used. She turned to Marcus. Marcus was trembling so hard, the ice tongs in his pocket were rattling. He couldn't look her in the eye. He was staring at her sneakers. Miss Vance? Marcus stammered, his throat dry. I had no idea. The system didn't tell you to be cruel, Marcus, James said softly. The system didn't tell you to sneer. You did that all on your own. I'm so sorry. I can fix this. Let me. He reached for a fresh pillow. Don't, James said. She held up a hand. I don't want you to serve me, Marcus. I don't want you to speak to me. I don't want you in this aisle. She turned to the captain. Captain O'Malley, is there another flight attendant available for first class? Yes, ma'am, O'Malley said instantly. Julie is in the back. I'll bring her up. Marcus, go to economy, row 45. You're working the galley for the rest of the flight. Do not come forward of the wing. Marcus looked like he was going to vomit. Row 45 was the very back row right next to the lavatories. It was the punishment station. For a chief purser who prided himself on working first class exclusively, it was a demotion worse than death. Go, O'Malley ordered. Marcus grabbed his jacket and did the walk of shame, passing the rows of passengers who were now whispering furiously. James sat down in seat 1A. She took a deep breath. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. She pulled out her phone. Captain, she said. Yes, Miss Vance? O'Malley was hovering, looking anxious. Tell Jonathan Reed he can breathe. I'm unfreezing the funds. But tell him we need to have a serious conversation about corporate culture when I land in London. I will tell him immediately. Thank you, Miss Vance. And on behalf of the crew, I am deeply sorry. Fly the plane, Captain, James said, closing her eyes. Just fly the plane. The flight to London was 6 hours and 40 minutes of surreal high-altitude tension. Usually first class on Aerolux was a haven of soft chimes, clinking silverware, and hushed luxury. Tonight, the atmosphere was brittle. The other passengers in the cabin walked on eggshells. They had witnessed the execution of a social hierarchy and the installation of a new queen, and they were terrified of making a wrong move. James didn't sleep. She had intended to, but the adrenaline coursing through her system made rest impossible. She opened her laptop, a battered sticker-covered MacBook that looked like it belonged to a college student, and began to work. Julie, the flight attendant brought up from economy to replace Marcus, was a young woman with a kind face and a nervous tremor in her hands. She approached James's seat 20 minutes after takeoff. Miss Vance, Julie whispered, crouching down so she was at eye level, a sign of respect and training that Marcus had notably skipped. Can I get you anything? We have the dinner menu, or if you'd just like some tea. James looked up from a spreadsheet. Water is fine, Julie. Sparkling if you have it, and maybe some aspirin. Of course, right away. As Julie hurried off, the man in seat 1B leaned across the aisle. He was an older gentleman with silver hair and a kind, albeit shaken expression. Excuse me, he said tentatively. James braced herself. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to explain herself. Yes. I wanted to say, the man stammered. That was the most impressive thing I have ever seen in my life. James softened slightly. It shouldn't have been necessary. No, the man agreed. It shouldn't have. But I've flown this route for 10 years. I've seen that purser Marcus treat people like furniture. I've never seen anyone stand up to him. I didn't know you could freeze an airline. It's a lever, James said, turning back to her screen. You only pull it when the machine tries to crush you. The flight dragged on. In the back of the plane, things were not going well for Marcus Sterling. The economy cabin was packed. A tour group of high school students was taking up rows 30 through 40, and they were rowdy. The air conditioning in the rear galley was malfunctioning, making the small space hot and stagnant. Marcus was used to the spacious, cool, perfumed air of the front galley. He was used to pouring Dom Perignon and discussing wine pairings. Now he was wrestling with a jammed coffee pot, while a teenager in 42C pressed the call button incessantly. "Excuse me, sir." "My screen is frozen," the kid yelled. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. His pristine uniform was already wrinkling. "I'll get to it in a minute," he snapped. "Hey, don't be rude," the kid's mother shouted from the middle seat. "I want your name. I'm going to report you." Marcus closed his eyes. Report me. The irony was bitter like bile. He knew with a sinking dread that he wouldn't have a job to be reported from by tomorrow morning. He thought about the moment at the gate. He played it over and over in his head. The hoodie, the sneakers. Why didn't I just check the name? Why did he assume he knew why? He had spent 20 years curating a snobbery that he thought elevated him. He thought by associating with the rich by guarding their gate, he became one of them. He thought he was the bouncer at the exclusive club. He forgot that the bouncer is still just hired help, and he had just bounced the owner of the building. Back in first class, the cabin lights were dimmed. James was typing an email to her board of directors. Subject: operational concerns. Horizon Air Group body effective. Immediately we are instituting a mandatory operational audit of Horizon's customer-facing protocols. The incident today was not an isolated personnel failure. It was a symptom of a systemic culture of elitism that poses a material risk to the brand's value. If we are funding them, they represent us, and I will not be represented by bigotry disguised as policy. She hit send. A moment later, the Wi-Fi icon on her screen blinked. A news alert popped up in the corner of her browser. Breaking Bradford Halloway, escorted off flight at JFK. Vantage Holdings announces hostile bid for Halloway Corp. The news moved fast. Faster than the plane. James clicked the link. The article detailed how Halloway was removed by police for disorderly conduct, and how minutes later Vantage Holdings had executed a pre-planned but accelerated buy order that triggered a sell-off of Halloway's own stock. James allowed herself a small, grim smile. She hadn't actually planned the takeover because of the seat the deal had been in the works for months, but the timing. The timing was her little gift to him. By the time he got his phone back from the police, he would be millions of dollars poorer. Karma wasn't just hitting back, it was hitting with precision airstrikes. Suddenly the plane banked slightly. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain O'Malley. We're encountering some unexpected turbulence over the Atlantic. I'm going to ask the flight attendants to take their seats immediately. It's going to get a little bumpy." It wasn't just a little bumpy. Within seconds, the massive 777 dropped. It was that stomach-churning sensation of falling in an elevator, but sustained. Cups rattled. The few passengers sleeping woke up with a start. In the rear galley, Marcus was unsecured. He had been trying to hide in the lavatory to check his phone. When the drop happened, he was thrown against the metal door hard. He crumbled to the floor, his shoulder throbbing. "Cabin crew, take your seats now." O'Malley yelled, his voice tight. James gripped the armrests of seat 1A. She wasn't afraid of flying, but the violence of the turbulence was unusual. The plane shook like a toy in a dog's mouth. Then the lights flickered. A collective scream rose from economy, muffled but audible through the curtains. James looked out the window. It was pitch black, but she could see the strobe light on the wing-tip, flashing against the thick, swirling clouds. Then she saw something else. A spark. From the number 1 engine, the one on her side, the left side, a streak of orange flame shot out. It was brief like a cough of fire, but it was unmistakable. Compressor stall. The engine groaned, a low, grinding mechanical sound that vibrated through the floorboards and into James's bones. The plane yawed to the left. The captain's voice returned no longer calm. "Flight attendants, stay seated. We have a minor technical indication on engine 1. We are descending to a lower altitude." James knew corporate speak. Minor technical indication meant something is broken. She looked at the empty seat across the aisle. 1A was spacious, but 1K was empty because the passenger had missed the connection. She felt incredibly alone. She thought about the $900 million. If this plane went down, that money would stay in the bank. Her legacy would be... what a hoodie. A news headline. No, she thought. I'm not dying today. Not after dealing with Marcus and Bradford. The plane shuddered again, leveling off at a lower altitude. The grinding noise from the engine continued, a constant menacing reminder of their fragility. Julie, the young flight attendant, was strapped into the jump seat facing the cabin near the cockpit door. She looked terrified. Her eyes met James's. James gave her a nod. A solid, grounding nod. "It's okay." Julie took a deep breath and nodded back. But in the back of the plane, panic was setting in. And with the chief purser injured and hiding in the back and the other flight attendants strapped in there, was a vacuum of leadership. The plane was stable for now, but the atmosphere had shifted from social drama to survival. James closed her laptop. The battery was dead anyway. She sat in the dark, listening to the engine groan, flying toward a dawn that felt very far away. She didn't know it yet, but the drama on the ground was about to look like a playground squabble compared to what was waiting for them in London. Because the call she made to freeze the funds hadn't just angered the airline CEO, it had triggered an automated audit algorithm in the banking software, and that algorithm had just flagged something that had nothing to do with James Vance. It had flagged a transaction from inside the airline, a transaction authorized by someone on this very flight. The turbulence was just the beginning. The remainder of Flight 492 was a masterclass in sustained tension. The aircraft, a wounded beast limping across the Atlantic on one good engine, flew lower and slower than usual. The cabin altitude was higher, making the air thinner, the kind that gave you a dull headache right behind the eyes. The cabin lights remained off. The only illumination came from the faint glow of the emergency floor track lighting, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the thick cloud cover outside. The grinding noise from the number 1 engine had settled into a monotonous, vibrating hum that rattled the teeth of everyone on board. James sat in 1A, the expensive leather seat now feeling like a cage. She couldn't sleep. The adrenaline that had fueled her confrontation at the gate had transmuted into a hyper-aware state of anxiety. It wasn't fear of crashing. James was a pragmatist. If they crashed, they crashed. It was the fear of unresolved variables. Her laptop was dead, a black mirror reflecting her exhausted face in the intermittent lightning flashes. She needed information. The sudden freezing of $900 million was a nuclear option, and while necessary to assert dominance and protect her firm's reputation, it was a blunt instrument. Blunt instruments usually caused collateral damage. She pulled out her phone. No signal, obviously. But the in-flight Wi-Fi, an exorbitant $35 charge she usually scoffed at, was technically active, though struggling. She connected. The little loading wheel spun for an eternity. Connecting. Connecting. Finally, a bar appeared. It was slow, agonizingly slow, like trying to suck cement through a straw. Her email client refreshed. Nothing new since takeoff. Then her secure messaging app, the one Vantage Holdings used for sensitive internal comms, encrypted to military standards, pinged. It was a single red dot. David, her CFO. The message had been sent 2 hours ago, just before the turbulence hit. It had been floating in the digital ether, waiting for a connection. David, CFO, James, are you airborne? We have a situation. A massive red flag just popped up on the horizon audit. James's thumbs hovered over the glass screen. The plane shuddered as it hit an air pocket, dropping 50 feet in a second before stabilizing. She didn't even look up. James, I'm here. Engine trouble, flying low. What kind of flag? The response took 3 minutes to arrive due to the lag. David, CFO. When you ordered the freeze, our system automatically initiated a deep dive protocol on their last 24 hours of transactions. Standard procedure to ensure they aren't trying to hide assets before a bankruptcy filing. James and David, CFO. And the AI caught something. While you were arguing at the gate between 8:15 a.m. and 8:35 a.m. EST, a transfer was executed from Horizon's London operational account. $12.5 million. Wired to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, labeled as Emergency Fuel Hedging Adjustment. James stared at the number. $12.5 million. In the grand scheme of the $900 million deal, it was a rounding error. But the timing. James Fuel Hedging. They don't pay that out of the London Ops account. That's corporate treasury. David, CFO. Exactly. It's clumsy. It looks panicked. Like someone was trying to grab cash and run before the whole ship sank. The freeze you put on stopped the main deal, but this side door transfer slipped through just seconds before the lock engaged. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the aircraft's air conditioning spread through James's chest. Someone at Horizon knew the company was fragile. Someone knew that James Vance being denied boarding was the catalyst that would bring the whole house of cards down. And in that 15-minute window of chaos at the gate, while Marcus was sneering and Bradford was preening, someone had used the distraction to loot the vault. James. Who authorized it? I need a name, David. The lag seemed longer this time. The plane banked slowly to the right, adjusting course for the approach into UK airspace. David, CFO, the authorization code belongs to Julian Croft, VP of Treasury for Horizon. James's breath hitched. She knew that name. She had sat across from Julian Croft in 3 different meetings over the last 6 months. He was a quiet man, impeccably dressed, always sweating slightly, always deferring to CEO Jonathan Reed. He was the numbers guy, the boring guy. David, CFO. We're trying to locate him. Reed says he's out of the office today. Personal day. James slowly lifted her head from the phone. She looked across the darkened first-class cabin. The seats were arranged in a 1-2-1 configuration. She was in 1A. 1K was empty. Behind her were rows 2, 3, and 4. She unbuckled her seatbelt, ignoring the illuminated sign over her head. "Ms. Vance," Julie, the young flight attendant, sitting in the jump seat by the door, whispered anxiously. "Please," the captain asked everyone to remain seated. "It's fine, Julie," James said, her voice calm but steel-hard. "I just need to stretch my legs." She stood up in the aisle, using the overhead bins to balance herself against the swaying of the aircraft. She looked back. Most passengers were asleep or pretending to be eye masks on blankets pulled up to their chins. James's eyes scanned the headrests. Row 2. Row 3. In seat 4K, the window seat in the very last row of first class, sat a man. He wasn't sleeping. The soft blue light of a tablet illuminated his face. He was wearing a charcoal suit even now. He was balding slightly, and even in the dim light, James could see the sheen of perspiration on his forehead. It was Julian Croft. He was deadheading, flying as a passenger on his own airline, likely headed to London to manage the fallout of the very crisis he helped engineer, or perhaps to disappear into the fog with his $12.5 million retirement fund. He hadn't said a word during the altercation at the gate. He hadn't defended James, the woman whose company was about to save his. He had sat there quiet as a mouse, watching the chaos, and using it as cover to type in the authorization codes that stole millions. He looked up as James stood there in the aisle. For a second, their eyes met in the darkness. Croft's eyes widened. He quickly shut off his tablet, plunging his seat into darkness. James sat back down in 1A. Her heart was pounding harder than it had during the engine failure. She wasn't just on a plane with a damaged engine. She was trapped in a metal tube at 30,000 feet with a corporate felon who had just realized he'd been made. She picked up her phone again. The descent into London was a nightmare. The 707 shuddered violently as it battled a fierce North Atlantic storm on a single engine. In seat 1A, James wasn't praying. She was calculating. The secure message from her CFO had confirmed it. The $12.5 million unauthorized transfer originated from a user ID logged in on this flight. She scribbled a frantic message on a cocktail napkin. Security threat. Seat 4K. Embezzlement suspect. Call police. She pressed it into Julie's trembling hand. "Get this to the captain, now, or we don't have an airline tomorrow." Julie, pale with terror, slipped into the cockpit. Minutes later, the landing gear slammed onto the runway, a hard, jarring impact that elicited screams from economy. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the wounded bird. But instead of taxiing to Terminal 5, the plane veered to a remote, rain-swept holding area surrounded by service vehicles. The engines died. Silence fell heavy and suffocating. Suddenly, the cockpit door flew open. Captain O'Malley emerged sans jacket, his shirt soaked in sweat. He held the crumpled napkin in a fist that shook with rage. He didn't look at James. He marched straight to the back of the first-class cabin. "Julian Croft," O'Malley barked, his voice booming in the quiet cabin. "Get up!" In seat 4K, the man who had been hiding in the shadows all flight froze. Julian Croft, the airline's VP of Treasury, looked up, feigning indignation. "Captain, I'm a senior executive. What is the meaning of this delay? I need to get to the gate." "The meaning," James said, unbuckling and standing up, "is that your emergency fuel hedging transfer to the Cayman Islands just got flagged." She held up her phone, displaying the transaction log. "User J. Croft, 8:22 a.m. While I was being humiliated at the gate, you were robbing the vault." The color drained from Croft's face, leaving him looking like a corpse. She's lying. She's the one who froze the assets. She's hysterical. "I froze the deal to save the company," James countered, stepping closer, her voice razor-sharp. "You used the chaos as a smokescreen. You let Marcus humiliate me because you needed a distracted gate agent to bypass the firewall unnoticed. You didn't care if the plane took off. You just needed the Wi-Fi to steal the retirement fund." "That's enough," O'Malley growled. He pulled a pair of heavy-duty plastic flex cuffs from his back pocket. "You can't do this," Croft shrieked as O'Malley spun him around. "I'm your boss. Not anymore," O'Malley said, cinching the cuffs tight around Croft's wrists. "Now you're just a security risk." He shoved the struggling executive back into the seat. "Julie, watch him. If he moves, scream." O'Malley turned to James, his anger softening into exhausted respect. "You said on the napkin to call the cops." James nodded toward the flashing blue lights, visible through the rain-streaked window. "They're waiting, Captain. I think Mr. Croft is about to miss his connection." The cabin door hissed open, letting in the damp chill of the London rain and the flashing blue lights of the police cruisers on the tarmac. 2 Metropolitan Police officers boarded immediately, bypassing the stunned passengers in rows 1 through 3. They stopped at row 4. "Julian Croft?" the lead officer asked. Julian shriveled in his seat, simply nodded. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement." The sharp click of steel handcuffs replacing Captain O'Malley's plastic ties echoed through the silent cabin like a gavel strike. As Julian was marched off, he cast one desperate look at James. She didn't blink. She simply took a sip of water, watching him disappear into the night. As the first-class cabin cleared, Marcus Sterling stood by the exit, clutching a trash bag. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a trembling fear. He looked 10 years older. "Miss Vance," he stammered, his voice cracking. I just wanted to say, I didn't know." James adjusted her hoodie, stopping inches from him. "That's the problem, Marcus. You treated me like trash because you thought I was powerless. If you knew I was rich, you would have treated me like a queen. That isn't respect. That's a transaction. And that is why you will never sit in seat 1A. She walked past him into the rain, leaving him shivering in the cold draft of the open door. 3 days later, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the Thames horizon, CEO Jonathan Reed looked like a ghost. James slid a single sheet of paper across the mahogany table. "The $900 million transfer is authorized. 12,000 jobs are saved." Reed slumped with relief. "Thank you, James." "Don't thank me," James said, her voice steel. "There are conditions. You will abolish the global services status that breeds entitlement. You will audit your hiring practices, and the gate agent and Marcus Sterling are to be terminated immediately for cause." "Done," Reed confirmed. "And Bradford Halloway?" David James's CFO grinned. He missed his merger signing while being processed by the police. His partners pulled out and his stock tanked 40% overnight. He's finished. 6 months later, during the holiday rush at JFK, James stopped at a newsstand for a bottle of water. The cashier moved sluggishly, wearing a cheap blue vest, looking beaten down by the crowd. $4, he mumbled, not looking up. James recognized the voice. She looked at the name tag, Marcus. The man who once ruled the skies was now selling snacks on the ground. James placed a $5 bill on the counter. "Keep the change, Marcus." He froze his head, snapping up. Horror filled his eyes as he recognized the woman in the grey tracksuit. James didn't look back. She merged into the crowd, invisible, powerful, and heading for first class. So did they get what they deserved? Marcus lost his wings to sell water on the ground. Julian traded a corporate suite for a prison cell. And Bradford Halloway went from a millionaire to a cautionary tale. James Vance proved that true power isn't about the suit you wear or the noise you make. It's about who you are when you think no one is watching. We live in a world that loves to judge by appearances. But remember this story next time you see someone in a hoodie and sneakers. They might be nobody. Or they might be the one signing your paycheck. What would you have done if you were James? Would you have frozen the money? Or would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of massive karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell notification so you never miss a story about justice being served cold. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.